He signed the divorce papers with a Mont Blanc fountain pen, swirling his signature like a king, claiming new territory. Owen Patrick thought he had just pulled off the heist of the century, forcing his quiet wife out of the billion-dollar tech empire they built together for pennies on the dollar. He was celebrating his victory before the ink was even dry, but Owen made a fatal calculation. He mistook silence for weakness. He didn't know that while he was busy posing for magazine covers, his wife hadn't just built the company. She owned the very ground he was standing on. This is the story of how one man claimed victory, only to realize he had just signed his own death warrant. The champagne in Owen Patrick's glass cost more than the average American's car, and tonight it tasted like absolute power. Owen stood on the balcony of his penthouse, overlooking the shimmering expanse of Hudson Yards. The wind whipped at his tailored Tom Ford suit, but he didn't feel the chill. He felt heat, the adrenaline of a kill. Inside, the bass of a deep house track thumped against the glass, mingling with the laughter of New York's elite. They were here for the Patrick Dynamics quarter-end gala, but Owen knew what the party was really about. It was a freedom party. "You look like a man who just lost a wife but gained a fortune," a voice purred from behind him. Owen turned to see Isabella Ricci, his vice president of marketing, and the woman currently occupying the other side of his king-sized bed. She was stunning in a dress that looked like liquid silver, holding a tablet rather than a drink. "Better, Bella?" Owen grinned, his teeth white and predatory. "I didn't just gain a fortune. I secured the crown." He took a sip of the vintage Krug. "Diana signed the settlement agreement an hour ago. No alimony, no stock options in the holding company, just the payout from the joint checking account and the Hamptons house." Isabella's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock crossing her face. "She took the Hamptons house? That place is a money pit. And she walked away from the equity? Owen, Patrick Dynamics is trading at $450 a share. That's insane." "It's not insane. It's Diana," Owen scoffed, turning back to the city lights. "She's weak. She's risk-averse. She saw the intimidating legal filing Marcus drafted, threats of exposing her mental instability because she saw a therapist 5 years ago, and she folded. She just wants to go back to her books and her garden." He laughed, a sound that lacked any warmth. "I told you, I was the vision. She was just the back-end support, replaceable." Inside the penthouse, his lawyer, Marcus Thorne, a man known in Manhattan divorce circles as the Butcher, waved him over. Owen slid the glass door open, the noise of the party rushing over him. "Owen!" Marcus shouted over the music, his face flushed with scotch and triumph. He slapped a thick leather folder onto the marble kitchen island. "The courier just confirmed. The dockets are filed. The judge stamped it at 4:55 p.m. You are officially a single man, and Patrick Dynamics is 100% under your control." A cheer went up from the inner circle gathered around the island, mostly board members who had sided with Owen during the silent coup. They clinked glasses. "To the visionary," someone shouted. Owen soaked it in. For 10 years he had felt suffocated. Sure, Diana had written the original code for the Ether algorithm, the predictive AI that made them billionaires. But he had sold it. He had charmed the investors at Sequoia. He was the one on the cover of Forbes and Wired, styled as the next Steve Jobs. Diana? She was the woman in the oversized cardigan who didn't like speaking at conferences. He resented her. He resented that every time he wanted to pivot the company, he had to ask her permission because of how the original partnership was structured. He resented that she knew the code better than he did. But 6 months ago, he had started the plan. He moved assets. He buried revenue in shell companies. He gaslit her, telling her the company was failing, that they were on the brink of bankruptcy, and that a divorce settlement was the only way to save her from his impending financial ruin. And she had believed him. "One thing, though," Marcus said, leaning in, his voice dropping slightly. "Did she have legal representation? I mean, real representation? The document lists a Silas Graves as her counsel." I looked him up. Guy operates out of a strip mall in Queens. No website, no LinkedIn. Owen waved a dismissive hand. "Exactly. She probably found him in the phone book. She's sentimental, Marcus. She likely hired some old family friend to hold her hand while she cried. She didn't want a fight. She wanted an exit." Isabella slid her arm through Owen's. "Well, she got it. And we got everything else." Owen looked at Isabella, then at the sprawling skyline. He felt invincible. He had successfully cut off the dead weight. The Ether algorithm was about to launch version 2.0, which would integrate with military defense systems. The contract was worth billions, and Diana wouldn't see a dime of it. "Let's make a toast," Owen announced, silencing the room. He raised his glass. "To the future. A future unburdened by the past. To Patrick Dynamics." "To Patrick Dynamics!" The room roared. As the glass touched his lips, Owen's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a notification from the building's concierge. "Mr. Patrick, a courier just dropped off a personal package for you. Marked, urgent, regarding settlement." "Shall we bring it up?" Owen frowned. The settlement was done. What now? A tearful goodbye letter? A box of his old sweaters? "Send it up," he texted back. 5 minutes later, a waiter placed a small, nondescript cardboard box on the marble island. No bow, no fancy wrapping, just a label with his name on it. The room went quiet, sensing the curiosity of the host. "What is it?" Isabella asked, tracing the edge of the box with a manicured nail. "Probably her wedding ring," Owen sneered. She always was dramatic in her own quiet way. He cut the tape with a steak knife and flipped the lid open. Inside, there was no ring. There was no letter. There was only a single, heavy, rusted iron key, and underneath it, a USB drive taped to a piece of paper. Owen picked up the paper. It was a printout of a screenshot. It showed a server command line, computer code, specifically the root directory of the Ether source code. At the bottom of the page, in Diana's neat, small handwriting, were 3 words: "Check the timestamp." Owen frowned. He didn't understand. He handed the paper to his CTO, a nervous man named Greg, who was standing nearby with a gin and tonic. "Greg, what is this? What does 'check the timestamp' mean?" Greg squinted at the paper. His face went pale almost instantly. He looked up at Owen, then back at the paper, his hand starting to shake. "Owen," Greg whispered, the blood draining from his face. "This screenshot, it's of the core kernel, the heart of the AI." So, the timestamp on the file modification is from this morning, 9:06 a.m. "Impossible," Owen snapped. "Diana has been locked out of the servers for 3 months. I revoked her admin access myself." "Owen," Greg's voice cracked. This isn't the code we have on the servers. This is an overwrite command. It says, lease expired." Owen felt a cold prickle of sweat on his neck. "What are you talking about? Lease?" "The Ether algorithm," Greg stammered, looking terrified. "It's not running on our servers anymore. It looks like it was just being streamed to us." Owen snatched the paper back. He stared at the rusted key. The music was still thumping. The people were still laughing. But Owen Patrick suddenly felt like the floor of his penthouse was made of glass, and it was beginning to crack. 48 hours before the party. Diana Patrick sat in a room that smelled of old paper and lemon polish. It was the office of Silas Graves, located above a laundromat in Queens, just as Owen's lawyer had sneered. But what Owen didn't know, and what his high-priced corporate investigators had failed to uncover, was that Silas Graves wasn't a divorce lawyer. Silas Graves was a patent attorney for the estates of the old New York industrial families. He buried bodies with paperwork. Diana sat in a wingback chair, her posture perfect. She wasn't wearing the dowdy cardigans Owen despised. She wore a sharp, charcoal blazer and combat boots. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was loose, framing a face that was no longer soft with patience. It was hard with resolve. "He offered the Hamptons house," Diana said, her voice steady. Silas, a man in his 70s with suspenders and a face like a crumpled map, chuckled dryly. He didn't look up from the file he was reading. "Of course he did. It has a lien on it he thinks you don't know about. He thinks he's saddling you with debt." "He also thinks he owns Patrick Dynamics," Diana added. Silas finally looked up. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and devoid of mercy. "And does he?" Diana reached into her bag and pulled out a thick, leather-bound notebook. It wasn't digital. It was analog. "Owen is a salesman, Silas. He sells the dream. But he never understood the engine. When I wrote Ether, I didn't write it for the company." She opened the notebook to a page dated 7 years ago. "I wrote Ether as a subroutine of a parent program I created in grad school. I called the parent program The Loom." Diana tapped the page. "When we incorporated Patrick Dynamics, Owen was so obsessed with the branding and the stock split that he never read the IP assignment agreement. He signed the transfer of rights for Ether, yes. But the contract defined Ether as output derived from the Loom." Silas smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "And who owns the Loom?" "Sterling Trust," Diana said. "My grandmother's estate. You set it up for me 10 years ago." "I did," Silas agreed. "Which means Patrick Dynamics doesn't own the AI. They own the license to use the results the AI produces. A license that is revocable upon—" He flipped through his own papers. "Ah, here it is. Change of control or dissolution of the marital union of the primary licenser." Diana nodded. "Owen thinks he's divorcing a housewife. He doesn't realize he's divorcing his vendor. And he's about to lose his license." Diana stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the rainy Queens Street. She remembered the early days, the nights she stayed up coding until her eyes burned, while Owen was out at networking dinners that lasted until 3 a.m. She remembered finding the hotel receipts. She remembered the way he would belittle her in front of the board, laughing off her technical concerns as anxiety. "Diana is the heart," he would say to investors. "But I am the head." He was wrong. She wasn't the heart. She was the spine, and he had just decided to rip himself away from it. "The settlement he sent over," Diana said, turning back to Silas. "It contains a non-compete clause?" "Draconian," Silas confirmed. "You can't work in tech for 10 years. You can't start a rival company. You can't even consult." "Good," Diana said. "Let him think I'm neutralized. I don't need to start a rival company. I already own his." She pulled a small rusted key from her pocket. "What's that?" Silas asked. "The key to the server room in the basement of the Hamptons house," Diana said. "Owen thinks that house is just a vacation spot. He forgot that when we started, we couldn't afford cloud storage. I built a server farm in the wine cellar. It's still there. It's hard-lined into the grid. It's where the Loom lives." She placed the key on the desk. "When I sign those divorce papers, Owen's automated systems will register the change in marital status. The Loom checks public records every 24 hours. Once the divorce decree is filed, The license expires. Automatically. Silas closed the folder with a satisfying thud. So, we sign his papers. We let him keep the money, the stocks, the brand, the office. He can keep the car, Diana said cold. He can keep the name. But the engine comes home. When do you want to sign? Diana checked her watch. Now. He has a party planned for Friday. I want him to feel like a king. I want him to stand on that balcony and look down on the world. She picked up a pen. It's a long fall from the penthouse, Silas. As Diana signed her name, Diana Sterling, dropping the Patrick immediately, she felt a weight lift off her chest. For years she had made herself small so Owen could feel big. She had dimmed her light so he could shine. She looked at the signature. It looked sharp, dangerous. Send her the papers, she said. And Silas? Send him a gift for the party. I'll prepare the package. She walked out of the office and into the rain. She didn't call an Uber. She walked to the subway. She had work to do. Owen Patrick was about to learn the difference between owning the interface and owning the code. The game had just begun. The silence in the penthouse was heavier than the bass that had been thumping just moments before. Owen Patrick had ordered the music cut. The guests, models, tech influencers, and hedge fund managers were ushered out by confused security guards, leaving half-finished cocktails and whispering lips in their wake. Now, the penthouse was a tomb of glass and steel. Owen stood over the kitchen island, his knuckles white as he gripped the marble edge. The rusted key sat there like a relic from a horror movie, mocking the sleek modernity of his life. "Explain it to me again," Owen said, his voice dangerously low. "And Greg, if you use the word glitch one more time, I will throw you off this balcony." Greg, the chief technology officer of Patrick Dynamics, was sweating through his linen shirt. He sat on a bar stool, typing furiously on a laptop that was hardwired into the apartment's secure network. His screen was a waterfall of red error messages. "It's not a glitch, Owen," Greg said, his voice trembling. It's a revocation. Think of Netflix. You stop paying the bill, the screen goes black. You don't own the movies. You just pay for the stream. "We built Ether!" Owen shouted, the veins in his neck bulging. "We built the servers. We hired the engineers. We have 500 people in Silicon Valley working on the code right now." "No," Greg whispered, stopping his typing. He turned the laptop around so Owen could see. "We have 500 people working on the interface. We have people building the dashboard, the analytics, the pretty graphs that we show the investors. But the brain? The actual decision-making engine?" Greg pointed to a blank, blinking cursor on the screen. "The brain wasn't hosted on our cloud, Owen. I always thought it was weird. The core data packets were always being routed through a secure, private VPN tunnel. I assumed it was for security protocols Diana set up. I didn't question it because, well, she was Diana. She was paranoid about security. "Where is the tunnel pointing to?" Owen demanded. Greg tapped a key. A map appeared on the screen, a single, pulsing red dot located on the tip of Long Island. "The Hamptons," Greg said. "The connection is hard-lined to a static IP address in East Hampton. That house." The connection was severed at exactly 5:01 p.m., 6 minutes after the judge signed your divorce decree. Owen felt the room spin. He looked at Marcus Thorne, his lawyer, who was currently pacing the living room, frantically whispering into his phone. "Marcus," Owen barked. "Get off the phone and tell me how this is legal. We own the IP. The prenup covered everything created during the marriage." Marcus hung up the phone and walked over. He looked older than he had an hour ago. The Scotch flush was gone, replaced by a pallor of sickly grey. I just had my junior associate pull the original incorporation documents from the archives, Marcus said, loosening his tie. Owen, tell me you read the Schedule A of the Intellectual Property Assignment Agreement when you founded the company. I don't read the appendices, Marcus. That's what I pay you for. I wasn't your lawyer 10 years ago, Marcus snapped back, losing his composure. You used Diana's family lawyer. I'm looking at the clause now. It distinguishes between Patrick Platform and the Loom source code. Patrick Dynamics owns the platform. A separate entity called the Sterling Trust owns the source code. Isabella, who had been sitting quietly on the sofa clutching a cushion, spoke up. Her voice was icy. Sterling Trust? Isn't Diana's maiden name Sterling? Yes, Marcus said. And here's the kicker. The license to use the source code was granted to Patrick Dynamics for a fee of $1 per year, revocable immediately upon the termination of the domestic partnership between the trustee of Sterling Trust and the CEO of Patrick Dynamics. Owen stared at him. She planned this, he whispered. She planned this 10 years ago. No, Isabella said, standing up. She walked over to the window, looking at the city lights. She didn't plan the divorce 10 years ago, Owen. She planned for protection. She knew that if you ever turned on her, she needed a kill switch. And you just pressed it. Owen pulled out his phone. He had 12 missed calls from the Asian markets. The Ether algorithm managed logistics for 3 of the world's largest shipping companies. If the AI stopped predicting routes, ships would sit in harbors. Cargo would spoil. Millions of dollars would vanish in hours. Fix it, Owen ordered, pointing at Greg. Hack it. Break into that server in the Hamptons remotely. I don't care if it's illegal. We need Ether back online before the New York Stock Exchange opens on Monday. If we open with a non-functional product, the stock goes to 0. Greg shook his head, looking defeated. I can't hack it, Owen. It's not just a password protection. The connection is physical. The fiber optic line has been clamped shut. To re-establish the handshake, someone has to physically go to the server location and input a cryptographic key. Owen's eyes fell to the marble counter, to the rusted iron key. Check the timestamp. He grabbed the key. It felt cold and heavy, rough against his manicured palm. She wants me to come, Owen realized. A dark realization washed over him. She's not hiding, she's waiting. He looked at Isabella. Pack a bag. I'm not going anywhere, Isabella said sharply. She was typing on her own phone now. I'm checking my own employment contract to see if my severance package is tied to the stock price, or if it's cash. You selfish. I'm realistic, Owen, she snapped. You just lost the company. I'm not going to the Hamptons to watch you beg your ex-wife for mercy. I'm staying here to manage the PR fallout before Variety finds out that the tech king of New York is actually just a man with a fancy website and no product. Owen turned to Marcus. You come with me. You're going to threaten her with everything. Extortion, theft of corporate property, corporate sabotage. We will bury her under so many lawsuits she won't be able to breathe. Marcus looked weary. I'll drive, was all he said. Owen grabbed his coat and the rusted key. As he walked toward the elevator, he looked back at the empty penthouse. The view of Hudson Yards, which had looked like a kingdom an hour ago, now looked like a jagged set of teeth waiting to swallow him whole. He was going to the Hamptons, to the money pit, to the woman he thought was weak. But as the elevator descended, dropping him 40 floors in seconds, Owen Patrick had the sinking feeling that he wasn't the hunter anymore. He was the prey being lured into the trap. The drive to the Hamptons usually took 2 hours in Owen's McLaren, but tonight, amidst the driving rain and the heavy Friday traffic, it felt like an eternity. The rhythmic thwack-thwack of the windshield wipers was the only sound in the car. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, frantically reviewing case law on his tablet, the blue light illuminating his anxious face. Owen drove aggressively, weaving through traffic, his mind racing. He replayed the last 10 years in his head. Every meeting where he talked over Diana. Every time he took credit for an update she had coded. Every time he rolled his eyes when she wanted to leave a party early. He had viewed her as an accessory, reliable, functional, but ultimately dull. He had never once considered that beneath that quiet demeanor lay a strategic mind capable of constructing a doomsday device. "She's bluffing," Owen muttered, gripping the leather steering wheel. "She has to be. She cares about the company. It's her legacy, too. She won't let it burn just to spite me." "It's not spite, Owen," Marcus mumbled without looking up. "It's leverage. And right now, she has all of it. If we can't get that server back online by Monday morning, the SEC will suspend trading on Patrick Dynamics. You'll be investigated for fraud for selling a product you didn't own." "I didn't know. Ignorance of the contract you signed isn't a defense in federal court," Marcus said dryly. They exited the highway and turned onto the dark, winding roads of East Hampton. The massive hedges of the billionaires' estates loomed on either side of the road like walls of a maze. They pulled up to the driveway of the money pit. Owen expected to see the house dark and abandoned. Instead, the wrought-iron gates were open. The driveway was lined with small, solar-powered lights that guided the way. The house itself, a sprawling, shingle-style estate that had been in Diana's family for 3 generations, was glowing. Warm, yellow light spilled from every window, piercing the rain. It didn't look like a crime scene. It looked like a home. Owen skidded the car to a halt on the gravel. He didn't wait for an umbrella. He stormed out of the car, the rain soaking his Tom Ford suit instantly. He marched up the stone steps and pounded on the heavy oak door. "Diana, open this door!" He didn't wait. He shoved the key into the lock, but the door was unlocked. It swung open silently. Owen stumbled into the foyer. He was ready for a fight. He was ready to scream. But the house was quiet. It smelled of wood smoke and lavender tea. Classical music, Chopin, he recognized, Diana's favorite, was playing softly from hidden speakers. "In the library, Owen," a voice called out. It wasn't a shout. It was a calm, melodic instruction. Owen stormed down the hallway, Marcus trailing behind him with his briefcase like a nervous butler. They entered the library. It was a magnificent room, lined floor to ceiling with books, with a roaring fire in the stone hearth. Diana was sitting in a leather armchair by the fire. She held a book in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. She wore a simple cashmere sweater and jeans. She looked comfortable. She looked rested. She didn't stand up. She didn't look scared. She turned a page of her book. "You're wet," she noted, not looking at him. "You should have checked the weather. It always rains when the pressure drops." "Cut the crap, Diana!" Owen roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Turn it back on. Now." Diana finally looked up. Her eyes were clear, devoid of the tears he was used to seeing during their arguments. "Turn what back on?" "The AI, the system. You crashed the entire company." "I didn't crash anything," Diana said calmly. "I simply took back what was mine, my property, as per the agreement you signed." Marcus stepped forward, trying to regain some authority. "Mrs. Patrick." "Ms. Sterling," she corrected him gently. "Ms. or Sterling," Marcus stammered. "What you have done constitutes malicious interference with business operations. We are prepared to file an emergency injunction to force you to restore access." Diana closed her book and placed it on the side table. She stood up. She wasn't tall, but in that moment, she seemed to tower over them. An injunction? Diana smiled faintly. On what grounds, Marcus? The license expired. The contract is clear. Owen wanted a divorce. He wanted to sever all ties. He wanted a clean break. I gave him exactly what he asked for. She walked over to a chess set on a side table. She picked up the Black Queen. You see, Owen, she said, turning to her ex-husband, you spent so much time building the brand, the image, the stock price. You built a castle. But you built it on land you didn't own. We can negotiate, Owen said, his voice changing from anger to desperation. He wiped the rain from his face. Okay? You want money? Is that it? You want a bigger settlement? Fine. I'll give you 20% of the company back. We rip up the settlement. Diana laughed. It was a genuine laugh. 20%? Owen, I own 100% of the value. Without the loom, Patrick Dynamics is just a shell company with a nice logo. 50%, Owen shouted. Half. We go back to partners. Equal partners. Diana walked toward him. She stopped 2 feet away. She could smell the expensive cologne mixed with the rain and the sweat of his fear. I don't want the company, Owen, she said softly. I never liked the company. I hated the parties. I hated the lies you told the investors. I hated how you twisted my code to sell things to people who didn't need them. Then what do you want? Owen pleaded. Why are you doing this? I want you to understand, she said, her eyes locking onto his. I want you to understand that you didn't make me. I made you. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small remote. The server room, she said, pointing to a door hidden behind a bookshelf. The key you have opens the outer door, but the system requires a biometric scan to reboot my retina, my hand. Do it, Owen said. Please, I will, Diana said, but not for you, and not for Patrick Dynamics. She walked to the window and looked out at the rain. I've already received an offer, Owen, from your biggest competitor, Helios Systems. They've been trying to replicate my code for years. They called me 10 minutes after the system went down. They knew. Owen felt like he had been punched in the gut. Helios was run by his nemesis, David Chen. You wouldn't, Owen whispered. I'm selling the loom to Helios, Diana said casually. The deal includes a clause. They acquire the tech, but they don't acquire the liabilities of Patrick Dynamics, which means... Marcus dropped his briefcase. Which means Patrick Dynamics defaults on its contracts, the lawyer whispered. The lawsuits from the shipping companies alone will bankrupt the estate. Owen, if she sells to Helios, you're personally liable for the breach of contract. You'll lose everything. The penthouse, the cars, the offshore accounts. Diana turned back to them. The firelight danced in her eyes. The deal isn't signed yet, she said. David is coming over in the morning, 8 a.m. She looked at the grandfather clock in the corner. It's 11 p.m. now. You have 9 hours, Owen. 9 hours to what? Owen asked, his voice broken. To save your reputation, Diana said. You can't save the company. The company is dead, but you can save yourself from prison. How? Diana walked back to her chair and sat down. She picked up her tea. You're going to record a video, she said. A public statement. You're going to admit that the success of the algorithm was due to the work of your partner, Diana Sterling. You're going to admit that you pushed her out. And you're going to resign as CEO, effective immediately, handing over all remaining assets to a charity of my choosing. I can't do that, Owen said, horrified. It's suicide. No, Diana corrected him. It's a plea deal. If you do it, I'll include a provision in the Helios sale that covers the Patrick Dynamics liabilities. You'll walk away with nothing, but you'll walk away free. She took a sip of tea. Or, she shrugged, You can gamble. You can wait for the market to open on Monday. But I promise you, Owen, the fall from the penthouse is a lot harder when you're in handcuffs." The room fell silent again, save for the crackling fire and the rain against the window. Owen looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the floor. There was no legal move left. The Queen had cornered the King. "Where is the camera?" Owen whispered. The library was transformed into a makeshift studio. The irony was suffocating. Owen Patrick, a man who had spent millions on production crews, lighting directors, and PR consultants to craft his image, was now sitting on a wooden stool in front of a simple ring light Diana used for video calls with her grandmother. The rain had intensified, hammering against the window panes like a drum roll for an execution. Owen adjusted his tie. His hands were shaking so violently that he couldn't get the knot straight. He looked at his reflection in the dark lens of the camera, a mirrorless Sony set up on a tripod. He looked haggard. The Tom Ford suit was damp and wrinkled. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Don't squint," Diana said. She was standing behind the camera, arms crossed. "You look guilty when you squint." "I am guilty," Owen snapped, his voice cracking. "According to this script, I'm practically admitting to being a fraud." He waved the piece of paper she had printed out. It was 3 paragraphs, short, brutal, honest. "You aren't admitting to fraud, Owen," Diana corrected him, her voice devoid of sympathy. "You are admitting to hubris. There is a difference. Fraud gets you prison. Hubris gets you pity. I'm giving you the pity option." Marcus, the lawyer, sat in the corner, head in his hands. He had stopped trying to argue an hour ago. He knew the law, he knew the contract, and he knew that if they went to court, discovery would reveal the shell companies Owen had set up to hide assets. Marcus would be disbarred. Owen would be indicted. This video was the lifeboat. "Ready?" Diana asked. She reached for the record button. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the library burst open. Owen jumped, hope flickering in his eyes. Had Greg hacked the system? Had a miracle occurred? It was Isabella. She stood in the doorway, drenched, her silver dress ruined by mud, her hair plastered to her skull. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked wild. "Bella!" Owen breathed, standing up. "Thank God. Did you call the board? Did you get a crisis team?" Isabella ignored him. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes were locked on Diana. She walked into the room, the water dripping from her dress onto the Persian rug. She marched straight past Owen, as if he were a piece of furniture, and stopped in front of Diana. "I have the ledger," Isabella said, her voice trembling but clear. Owen froze. "What?" Isabella reached into her bra and pulled out a small, waterproof flash drive. She held it out to Diana. "The offshore accounts," Isabella said rapidly, talking only to Diana. "The Cayman shells where he hid the revenue from the Q3 earnings. The bribe payments to the regulators in Brussels. It's all here. I kept a backup. I knew he would eventually try to screw me over too." Diana looked at the drive, then at Isabella. A small, impressed smile touched her lips. "Insurance. Immunity," Isabella countered. "I want full immunity. If this goes down, I was a whistleblower. I was gathering evidence. I wasn't a co-conspirator." "Isabella!" Owen screamed. The betrayal hit him harder than the divorce. "I bought you that apartment. I made you VP. I left my wife for you." Isabella finally turned to him. Her face was a mask of disgust. "You didn't leave her for me, Owen. You left her because you thought you didn't need her anymore. And you didn't make me VP because I was smart. You made me VP because I was quiet." "Well, I'm not quiet anymore." She turned back to Diana. "Do we have a deal?" Diana took the flash drive. She weighed it in her hand. You were the one who suggested the mental instability clause in the divorce settlement, weren't you, Isabella? Isabella flinched. It was a strategy. It was cruel, Diana said softly. She placed the drive in her pocket. But I'm a pragmatist. You get your immunity. I won't name you in the civil suits. But you leave the industry. You go back to marketing shoes or soda. You never touch tech again. Done, Isabella exhaled, slumping with relief. Owen stood there, watching the two women barter over his carcass. He realized then that he had never really known either of them. He had projected his own desires onto them. Diana the mouse, Isabella the trophy. He had been so busy looking in the mirror, he hadn't seen the knives they carried. Sit down, Owen, Diana commanded. The price just went up. I can't, Owen whispered. Sit down. Diana's voice cracked like a whip. Owen collapsed onto the stool. Isabella just gave me the evidence to put you away for 20 years, Diana said, stepping behind the camera again. So now you're not just resigning. You're apologizing to me, specifically. By name. She hit the red button. The tally light turned on. Action, she said, cold. Owen looked into the lens. He saw his future dissolving. He swallowed the lump in his throat. My name is Owen Patrick, he began, his voice shaking, and for the last 10 years, I have lived a lie. He read the script. He admitted that the ether algorithm was the sole creation of Diana Sterling. He admitted that he had taken credit for her genius. He admitted that Patrick Dynamics was essentially a marketing firm wrapping her product. Effective immediately, Owen choked out, tears finally spilling over his cheeks. Real tears, not for the camera, but for himself. I am resigning as CEO of Patrick Dynamics. I am relinquishing all voting rights. And I am sorry. To Diana, the woman who built the world I merely lived in. Cut, Diana said. She didn't smile, she didn't cheer. She simply walked over to the camera, stopped the recording, and pulled the memory card. Upload it, Owen whispered, putting his head in his hands. Just get it over with. I'm not uploading it to YouTube, Diana said, walking toward her computer desk. I'm uploading it to the SEC's secure whistleblower portal first. Then, I'm sending it to the board of directors. She looked back at him. The public will see it in the morning. Tonight, the sharks get to feed. The sun rose over East Hampton with a deceptive beauty. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a bruised purple and the air crisp and cold. The wet grass glittered like diamonds or broken glass. Owen hadn't slept. He sat in the library chair, staring at the dead fireplace. Marcus had fallen asleep on the sofa, his mouth open, snoring softly. Isabella had left hours ago, calling an Uber to take her back to the city, leaving Owen stranded. At 7:55 a.m., the sound of a helicopter cut through the silence. Owen didn't move. He knew who it was. The chopper landed on the wide lawn behind the house, the rotor wash flattening the manicured grass. A few minutes later, the library doors opened. David Chen walked in. The CEO of Helios Systems was everything Owen wasn't. He was short, unassuming, wearing a North Face fleece and sneakers. He didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like an engineer. He spotted Owen in the chair and paused. There was no mockery in his eyes, only a clinical curiosity. Owen, David nodded. David, Owen croaked. His voice was gone. David turned to Diana, who was standing by the window, fresh and alert. She had changed into a crisp white blouse and slacks. She looked like a CEO. Is the code secure? David asked, skipping the pleasantries. The server is isolated, Diana replied. I paused the kill switch. The loom is dormant, waiting for the new handshake protocol. And the liabilities? David asked, glancing at Owen. covered by the asset liquidation of the Patrick estate, Diana said smoothly. As per the video confession recorded last night, Owen has accepted full personal responsibility for the breach of contract. Helios acquires the IP clean. No debt. No lawsuits. David nodded, impressed. You're ruthless, Diana. You should have been running the company from day one. I was, Diana said. I just let him hold the steering wheel. David pulled a tablet from his bag. The transfer documents. 4.2 billion for the source code and the patent portfolio. Funds to be wired to the Sterling Trust. Owen flinched at the number. 4.2 billion. That was more than the market cap of Patrick Dynamics at its peak. Sign here, David said, handing the tablet to Diana. Diana signed with a flourish. And here, David said, turning to Owen. Owen looked up. Me? I don't own it. No, David said. This is the release. You are waiving any future claims against Helios or Diana Sterling. In exchange, Helios agrees to cover the legal fees for your upcoming defense. It was a crumb. A charity crumb. Owen took the stylus. His hand hovered over the screen. If he didn't sign, he went to jail with a public defender. If he signed, he went to court with a high-priced legal team, paid for by the man who just bought his life's work. He signed. Good business, David said, taking the tablet back. He looked at Owen one last time. You know, Owen, back in 2015 I tried to hire you. I thought you had vision. But Diana told me something at a conference once. She said, Owen falls in love with the reflection, not the object. I didn't understand what she meant until today. David shook Diana's hand and walked out. The helicopter spun up again, carrying away the future. The silence returned. So that's it? Owen asked, standing up. His legs felt weak. You won. You have the billions. You have the revenge. You destroyed me. Diana walked over to the desk and picked up the rusted key, the key to the server room. She tossed it into the trash can. I didn't destroy you, Owen. I just turned on the lights. You were the one who couldn't stand what you saw. She picked up a file folder. I've arranged for a car to take you back to the city, she said. Marcus can go with you. The driver is instructed to take you to the police station in Lower Manhattan. They're expecting you for a voluntary surrender regarding the fraud charges. You're sending me to jail? Owen gasped. I thought the video saved me. The video saved you from bankruptcy, Diana said. It ensures the debts are paid, so you don't spend the rest of your life owing money to the mob or the banks. But the fraud, the lies to the shareholders, that's on you, Owen. You have to pay for what you did. Owen looked at her. He looked for the woman he had married, the shy girl who loved coding and Chopin. He saw her, but she was hardened, like steel tempered in fire. Did you ever love me? Owen asked. It was the only question that mattered now. Diana paused. Her expression softened, just for a fraction of a second. I loved the man I thought we were building together, she said. But you fired him a long time ago. She turned her back to him. Goodbye, Owen. Owen stood there for a moment, waiting for a curtain call that would never come. Then he woke Marcus up. Let's go, Owen said. Where? Marcus mumbled, wiping drool from his chin. To the end, Owen said. They walked out of the front door. The town car was waiting. A black Lincoln, not a limo. Appropriate. As Owen stepped off the porch, he looked back at the house. He saw Diana in the window of the library. She wasn't looking at him. She was already on the phone, probably with her grandmother, probably planning the next chapter of the Sterling Trust. She had already moved on. Owen got into the car. As they drove away, leaving the Hamptons behind, he pulled out his phone. He had one notification. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a news alert. It was a notification from the Patrick Dynamics app on his phone. Error 404. Server not found. Please contact the administrator. Owen stared at the screen until it went black. He saw his own reflection in the glass. He looked old. He looked small. He placed the phone on the seat next to him and looked out the window. The scenery rushed by, a blur of green and grey. He was a passenger now, and for the first time in 10 years, he didn't know where he was going. 6 months later. The cafeteria at the Federal Correctional Institution in Otisville was a far cry from the penthouse at Hudson Yards. The noise wasn't the bass of a house track. It was the clatter of plastic trays and the low murmur of men who had nowhere to go. Owen Patrick sat alone. He had lost 20 pounds. The Tom Ford suits were replaced by khaki fatigues. He wasn't the king of tech here. He was inmate 7492, the guy who committed securities fraud and lost $1 billion empire in a weekend. He held a crumpled copy of Wired magazine, which another inmate had left behind. His hands shook slightly as he smoothed out the cover. There was no photo of a person on the cover, no stylized portrait of a visionary. Instead, there was just a simple, elegant graphic of a neural network glowing in the dark. The headline read, "The Invisible Hand, How the Sterling Trust is Quietly Solving the Climate Crisis." Owen flipped to the article. It detailed how a new, open-source AI called the Loom 2 was optimizing energy grids across Europe, reducing carbon emissions by 15% in just 3 months. The software was free for governments to use. The article mentioned that the technology was funded by an anonymous philanthropist through the Sterling Trust. There were no quotes from Diana, no photos of her. She hadn't given a single interview. She hadn't rung the opening bell at the stock exchange. She had simply taken the money, his money, their money, and used it to fix the world, while he sat in a cage built by his own ego. Far away, on a terraced hillside in Tuscany, the air smelled of rosemary and damp earth. Diana Sterling sat at a wooden table under a pergola, her laptop open. The screen showed a complex stream of data, the vitals of the new energy grid. She took a sip of local wine, cheap and delicious, far better than the vintage Krug Owen used to hoard. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Silas Graves. "The final transfer is complete. The Patrick Dynamics bankruptcy is settled. The creditors are paid. You are entirely clear. Also, Owen's appeal was denied." Diana looked at the message, then put the phone face down. She didn't feel a surge of triumph. She didn't feel joy at his suffering. She felt nothing. The anger had evaporated, leaving behind a clean, empty space where she could finally build something new. She looked out at the rolling hills. A man walked up the path. David Chen. He was carrying a basket of figs from the orchard. "The code is stable," David said, setting the basket down. "We're live in Tokyo as of 10 minutes ago." "Good," Diana said, typing a command to authorize the sync. "You know," David said, sitting opposite her, "we could announce this. You could be on the cover of Time. You could be the face of the new era." Diana smiled, closing her laptop. She thought of Owen, posing on that balcony, desperate for the world to see him, desperate for the applause. "Let them think it's magic, David," Diana said softly, picking up a fig. "I don't need to be the face. I prefer being the engine." She looked at the sunset. She wasn't a wife anymore. She wasn't a victim. She was the architect of her own life, and for the first time in 10 years, the foundation was solid stone. And that is the story of Owen Patrick and Diana Sterling. It's a brutal reminder that in the world of high stakes and billion-dollar empires, the loudest person in the room is rarely the smartest. Owen made the classic mistake of confusing visibility with power. He thought because he held the microphone, he owned the stage. But he forgot that the person who controls the lights can leave him in the dark with the flip of a switch. Diana's victory wasn't about taking the money, though she certainly did that. It was about reclaiming her intellectual property and her dignity. She proved that true power doesn't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, the most dangerous move you can make is to remain silent. Wait for your opponent to overextend, and then simply turn off the key. If you enjoyed this story of corporate revenge and silent justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And I want to know what you think. Do you think Diana went too far by sending Owen to jail, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. If you want more stories like this, about real-life drama, revenge, and the secrets of the ultra-wealthy, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you underestimate. The quiet ones are always the most dangerous. I'll see you in the next story.